not often, in fact, I think it's rather rare, that a former chief executive of any business praises a successor as much as I praise Jeff Zucker. By virtually every measure, and I should tell you what I'm saying today is an apple. By virtually every measure, Jeff's almost 5 years as president of CNN have been its best years, no matter what Donald Trump says. In those 5 years, CNN has doubled its global audience and doubled its profits. That in itself is an unprecedented success story. Under Jeff's leadership, CNN is now the most trusted news source, and it is used by more Americans than any other news source. The journalism resources at CNN have expanded dramatically. The CNN news budget has been increased significantly, while other media organizations have literally gutted their news gathering staff, including, sadly, my former newspaper, the Los Angeles Times. Under Jeff, CNN programming has been extraordinarily creative and successful. There are so many examples, but I will just say a successful show that I thought never would be, Anthony Bourdain. And all of the specials on the 60s, the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, the race to the White House. And CNN has soared, and I really mean soared, in the digital era like no other network. So far, this is the biggest year in CNN's digital history. I was at CNN recently. CNN is now deploying the latest technology that I think we always have tried, including CNN Air, the use of professionally trained pilots using drones, General, to cover hurricanes, earthquakes, fires, war zones, and your face has been on many of those. Revenues have climbed significantly, and incidentally, we all know you must have financial strength to have editorial strength. You must have it, or you cannot have the type of editorial and journalistic strength. The 2016 profits reportedly exceeded $1 billion. Not bad from the days when I was there, and Ted and I had $2 billion of debt. Throughout this turbulent era, Jeff Zucker has been a solid, very hands-on leader, earning the respect of the CNN staff, lifting its morale, I mean really lifting its morale, while withstanding harsh and unwarranted criticism from Donald Trump. He is taking CNN to new heights of excellence journalistically, operationally, and financially. I am now very proud to introduce the person that I consider the finest network news executive in America, my friend, Jeff Zucker.
Can I just say one thing first?
You surely can.
Thank you. So, Tom, I just want to say thank you. And I will say Tom has been beyond supportive of me. As he said, and I can attest, there's frankly no one who has been as supportive as Tom. So I just want to publicly say thank you to you. And I guess I should tell the quick story that I was supposed to come down and interview for a job with Tom in 1996, and I was all set to come down, and I was, 31 years old, and Tom asked me to come down and interview for a leadership role at CNN.
Ted and I had approved a package to offer him the presidency.
Okay, there you go. Okay, that's true. And it was in October of '96, and I got sick that month, and I was diagnosed with colon cancer that month, and And I called Tom and said that I wasn't going to be able to come down. And so as I always say, I got here a little later, but no one has ever been as supportive of this for me as Tom. So thank you.
Jeff, I know we're all thrilled to hear from you, and let's just jump right in. I want to start with apples and bananas. Can you talk a little bit about what's behind that? What do you say?
Yeah, so, well, for a while now, we've been talking internally about a brand campaign that signifies what we stand for and who we are. And we've been talking about it for, the last 6 months or so, especially as we've endured a number of assaults from the highest levels of government and folks who don't like us or whatever. And, people have been asking us to stand up for ourselves and to talk about who we are and what we are about. And we've been thinking about it for quite some time. And frankly, in the last couple of months, Allison Gallus, who runs our worldwide marketing, and her team, Rick Buchuk and Whit Freeze in particular, took the brief, which was, we want to tell the world what we stand for. And they came up with a number of campaigns, some of which were, traditional, wave the flag, journalism is great, we are important, look how great we are, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the campaigns that they came up with was this one that you've seen. And what we decided was that was exactly what we stood for, what we stand for, which is we're about the facts, we're about the truth. And we may talk about points of view and opinions later, but we're always going to lead with the facts. And so facts come first. And so that, and what I love about it is how simple it is. It's just simple, and I think that's why it cuts through. And it is, a lot of people have interpreted it in different ways, and a lot of people have interpreted it that it's meant to send a message to particular people.
That does have room for interpretation.
Well, interpretation's a good thing. It is meant solely as this is who we are about facts first.
What about internally, with all the criticism of being fake news and not doing, sort of going through the process of journalistic research and so forth, and you all are familiar with everything that's been going on. What's happened internally? Have there been changes in strategy or changes in the way you go after stories, the way you prepare for interviews?
No, I don't think really the core mission of CNN has changed at all, frankly, in 37 years. I think it remains today exactly what it's been, which is to tell the world's stories and to tell them fairly and accurately. And I think what we have really tried to personify is to hold those who are in power accountable. Because I think that is the most fundamental goal of any journalistic organization, is to hold those who hold authority accountable for what they say and what they do. And obviously that has been in evidence this year, because there have been many things that have been done and said that require accountability. And I think that's why there's been so much attention on it. But we're just doing the same thing that I think Ted Turner set out to do starting in 1980.
Are you, in terms of CNN, have you noticed, I guess industry-wide, a shift, whether consumers are interested in sort of middle-of-the-road coverage, or has there been a shift, if you will, away from sort of commentary on one side, commentary on the other side? Are people really looking to consume, like you said, just the facts straight down the middle?
Well, look, I mean, I think that there is tremendous interest in news and information today. The fact is, in the cable news arena, all of the cable news networks are enjoying record audiences. The New York Times and the Washington Post are enjoying tremendous resurgence. The one thing that I can say for sure is that Donald Trump has made American journalism great again. And that's a good and important thing.
Yeah.
And I think there is room for, clearly there is an appetite for opinion and partisan points of view in the cable news landscape. You have one network that is state-run TV. You have another network that is basically the opposition, and then CNN is meant to be there to tell the truth, and that's the role that we feel we take. There's an audience for each of those, and that's okay. We're not. There's always so much attention on audiences and audience sizes, and obviously, as Tom said, we're running a business, so we do need to do well because that's what allows us to then reinvest and have news gathering operations and investigative teams. So we do want to do well. But there is this constant drumbeat that, oh, well, your audience isn't as big as the other guys. Honestly, at the end of the day, our audience just needs to be as big as we need it to be able to pursue the journalism that we want to do. And if it's bigger than the others, okay, great. But it's not about that. It's about doing well, telling great stories, holding those in power accountable, and having the wherewithal and the resources to be able to do what you want to do. And the audiences have come and will continue to come.
Well, I want to shift a little bit. You talk about audiences. Tom mentioned digital. Where are you finding that consumers are getting their information, specifically CNN? Are they watching it on television? Are they getting it on their phone, on the go? What are you seeing?
Well, I mean, clearly the world has changed. More people consume news and information from CNN's digital products than will ever watch us on television. Changing people's mindsets to understand that has been an interesting thing that we've had to do.
Internally changing?
Yeah, internally, making, because many people come to CNN because it's a television network and they want to work there because it's a television network, and that's great and that's important. But the fact is, we reach more people through our digital products. And as you heard before, CNN is nobody actually touches us in terms of our digital traffic in the news and information space. And so we've clearly invested in that. We're continuing to make that a priority. That's how people consume news and information today. And we often say people are going to find out what's going on from Twitter, for instance. But they're going to come to CNN to see if it's true. Or they're going to come to CNN to hear more about it. And that's okay. We're okay if they find out about it from Twitter or something else. But the role that we play is to validate it or not validate it, to discuss it, to hear every side of it, and that's what we think our role is in this space in which people find out about what's going on from their phone.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, a lot of people. You're right. My younger nieces and nephews. That's what they're on Twitter.
Yeah.
And that's what they find.
But it's not always true, right?
Yeah, exactly.
It's not always true, and it's certainly never the full story, right? Because it's 140 characters, and so that's why we can play a huge role in whatever story is going on.
So, what types of investment has CNN made in technology and in whether it's through distribution or news gathering? Tell us about that.
Well, I think the last couple of years has really been about investing, because I do agree that the only way that you can succeed today in this business is to invest. We've made a tremendous investment in our news gathering capability. Before we get to digital, CNN from its inception has always been about covering breaking news. And that's what CNN is known for. That's what CNN has always done a terrific job at. I've wanted CNN to be about more than just covering breaking news. I wanted to break news as well, break actual news. And there is a distinction. And so we've invested heavily in our news gathering capability and our investigative capability. And so that...
And people.
That's really about people.
Right.
That's really about people. And so that's a fundamental place where we've invested. We've invested heavily in our digital operation in terms of people, in terms of technology and product development, and being able to deliver that news and information on all the digital platforms. So we've invested heavily in that. And then we've obviously also invested in what Tom mentioned in our original programming, that the programs like Anthony Bourdain and Race for the White House and programs like that. So and the idea behind those programs was, there was always going to be times and periods when the news cycle was less vibrant, and we wanted to fill in the gaps when there wasn't as much news. Now, I will say, this last year has not produced very many valleys in terms of news, but nonetheless, it's become a very important part of our identity and lineup. And so we've been able to juggle both the news, covering breaking news, breaking actual news, and having original series.
Yeah, and a lot of people are talking about each part of that pie. I want to talk a little bit about business, being a business reporter. The AT&T Time Warner deal. I understand over the weekend they sort of pushed back the deadline. If you would, can you tell us a little bit about how CNN could be affected by that deal? And oftentimes, people sort of, I don't know if they ask you, but there's always the question of what happens to CNN in Atlanta, when there are deals like this in the works.
Right. Well, they actually ask that question even when there's not deals. So I will just say, and I'll answer. I'll talk about the AT&T in a moment. But I do want to make this point that so I came here almost 5 years ago, the first time when I did this luncheon, and it always is the question of, are you gonna shut down CNN in Atlanta? Is CNN leaving Atlanta? And those questions, always seem to be out there. I will reiterate what I said 5 years ago. I've said it for each of the last 5 years, and I will say it again. CNN is not leaving Atlanta. Our commitment to Atlanta is exactly the same, and CNN is an integral part of Atlanta, and Atlanta is an integral part of CNN. So there's no change in that front at all. And I look forward to probably having to say that for each of the next 5 years.
Probably.
Because I don't know, I will say, the one thing about that question is, and ML and I've talked about this a lot, it doesn't matter how many times I say that, it's always the question, right? So, it's okay. With regard to AT&T, AT&T has said, and we expect that the acquisition of Time Warner by AT&T to happen by year's end here, which is frankly just another 8 weeks or so, right? So yeah, I think everything's on track for that still to happen in the next 6 to 8 weeks. And with regard to the impact on CNN, look, we actually think it's potentially very exciting and good for CNN. I don't really expect any changes day to day or anything like that. But AT&T has been very vocal in saying that they think that the future, the reason that they're doing this deal is that they think the future of video is mobile, and the future of mobile is video. Well, that's great, because that's what we say, right?
Right.
So, and that's what we think, and that's why we've invested so heavily in digital, for instance, and that's why we've put so much weight behind mobile video. And so if they can help us facilitate that and speed up that transition and allow us to put all of that on the bigger platforms, then I actually think this could be potentially fantastic for us. So, and I have no reason to believe that they won't. So I think there's really no change no real change day to day because of the ownership change. But I think in a bigger picture strategic standpoint, it could be potentially very exciting.
And CNN will stay in Atlanta.
I'll get back to you on that.
Well, good to know.
By the way, so that'll be the quote out of here.
Right.
We'll get back to them on.
Right.
So I'll say that was a joke.
Somebody's tweeting it right
Yeah,
now.
exactly. It's the CNN folks who are tweeting.
So there are a number of CNN people here.
I made them.
You made them come. She thought that was really fun. A number of CNN folks here, and I want to ask you about some of the headlines we've been seeing in recent weeks. How do you keep CNN a respected, a safe place for all of the folks who work there? I'm referring to some of the allegations of sexual abuse and discrimination and things like that, and the number of people.
You're not talking about those at CNN?
No.
No, I just wanted to be clear that.
No, but in recent weeks with the Harvey Weinstein and Fox News and you've seen so many, and other workplaces, you've seen so many people who have said, that happened to me, or that happened to me. There's more people. How do you, as a top executive, how do you endeavor to keep your workers safe and to make sure the environment is one?
So, no, look, I think that's an incredibly important conversation. It's incredibly pertinent. So I think a couple things. First of all, I think I really do believe that the tone and tenor is set at the top of those organizations, and frankly, I think if you look at Fox News or the Weinstein Company, you have to hold those who run those companies responsible, whether it's the board at the Weinstein Company or frankly, the family that owns Fox News. That's where the responsibility lies. And so, in our case, in my case, none of that. I believe that everybody knows that none of that is acceptable. None of that would be tolerated. And I think it's incumbent upon me and my leadership team, but me, to set that tone and to set that message, and to be clear that that behavior is completely unacceptable, won't be tolerated, and I have to lead by example with regard to that. So I think that's the first way that you make it a good and safe environment. Now, I think the other thing that you have to do is you have to make sure that the organization understands that there are avenues open to them to report things or discuss things or talk about things, and frankly, I think that is that's the result of good good HR work and good legal work. And when I hear that some of those other places, nobody knew where to go or who they could go to, again, that's a total failure of leadership, and that's not having the right organization in place. I can say that I can speak for CNN for sure. Those avenues are completely in place, and our HR and legal teams are first rate, and I have complete confidence that we are setting the right tone and doing the right things, and I just think it's absolutely crazy that behavior like that was tolerated in any of those organizations.
Well, thank you for addressing that and assuring us in terms of what's in place at CNN. We have a number of young people here. I'm glad you all are here. I want to talk a little bit about sort of the change that we've seen. I understand you sort of made your way through research, and you really kind of came up through the ranks of the media industry, if you will. Today, we're seeing maybe a little bit of a shift where you could be an instant star on YouTube or social media in some respects with being an on-air person. I want to know if you would address, especially again for some of the young people in the room, where you stand on maybe the value of sort of working your way up. Is that still necessary in the media industry? Or are there other avenues to getting where you are or getting on, whether it's CNN or some of the other things that we don't even know about in the future with regards to where media is going?
Yeah. So, well, first of all, anybody who tells you they know where media is going, run the other way.
There you go. Lesson number one.
But with regard to, look, I think there is no replacement for hard work, and there is no shortcut to success by not putting in the time and hours and dedication to whatever you want to do. And so, yes, we live in a world where there can be instant gratification through, social media and new forms of distribution. But the fact is, if you want to sustain that, if you want to have lasting impact, it still requires constant dedication, hard work, time, and be a little bit suspect of quick, instant success. Things that shine so brightly, so quick, tend to burn out just as fast. And I think that there's a lot to be said for hard work that sustains over time. And that would be what I would suggest.
I just want to let you all know that we will be opening the floor for questions, so be thinking of questions that you would like to ask Chef Zucker. Kind of sticking with the youth in the room, what's the best advice you were given early in your career, or maybe just yesterday?
No, I think something that I think two pieces of advice that I was given early in my television career were, don't be afraid to make a mistake. Be willing to put yourself out there and make a mistake. Just don't make the same mistake twice, right? So if you make a mistake, it's okay. Just don't repeat that mistake. And I have always tried to live by that. That because none of us is perfect, and we're all gonna fail at some point. But be willing to fail. Be willing to make a mistake. And then the other thing is, I don't know so much if it was a piece of advice, but just something that I always lived by was, the one thing that I always objected to when I was starting out was, well, that's not the way we do it.
Yes.
And this was told to me a lot when I was younger. Especially at the Today Show, when I was starting out, they would say, well, that's not the way we do it here. And I would say, well, it doesn't seem to be working the way you're doing it, so why don't we try it a different way? And I think it's the same thing. It's like, I think it's really important, and I try to believe this at CNN too, is to understand the legacy of wherever you're working, but not be bound by it. And it's important to respect what has gotten an organization to where it is, what's come before it. But I think if you're bound by it, then you will never innovate, you will never take chances, and you will never move forward. And so that's what I've always tried to remember as I've gone to new places or done new jobs or tried new things.
Good advice. Questions from the floor? This gentleman.
It's on a slightly different subject. You've been steadily adding programming to HLN.
I'm sorry?
You've been steadily adding programming to HLN,
Right.
okay? Could you describe what your vision is for what HLN would be compared to what CNN is?
Right. Yeah. So I think that the focus of HLN is twofold, and the way we differentiate it from CNN is that CNN will go deep into, you know, the big stories, usually political and global stories of the day. So that's obvious what CNN is. Whereas HLN will cover a wider variety of stories. Will take more time to do a much longer rundown of stories with a slightly less Washington point of view or tack, and then to really in prime time be more about mysteries and investigation. So that's the daytime is more wider range of stories with a less Washington focus, and mysteries and investigation by night. That's the vision for HLN.
Maria?
Maria, supporter of the Atlanta Business Chronicle and supporter report. When Ted Turner started CNN and all that, part of his altruistic mission was to create better communication internationally to help tear down walls between different countries, as evidenced by Tom Johnson's tie. Can you talk about whether CNN still has that big, larger mission, given all the problems that we are having in terms of communication, not only domestically, but internationally, and knowing what's going on?
Well, I do think I do think that it remains one of the goals of CNN to inform the world. You know, there's really only two global television networks today: CNN and the BBC. And the fact is, the BBC really has very little strength and influence within the United States. So to be a truly global player, you have to have that. So, you know, you could even make the argument that CNN is unique in its global reach. And we know that CNN is the network that they watch, you know, in Moscow and in Beijing, and in Seoul and Paris and Pyongyang. And I think with that comes a tremendous amount of influence and a tremendous amount of responsibility. And I think that is still true today, and I think that is both a great opportunity and a great responsibility, and something we take very seriously. You know, our international footprint, both from a distribution standpoint and from a news gathering standpoint, remains incredibly vibrant, important, and unique. The broadcast news networks here in the United States have 3 correspondents outside the United States. Certainly one of them does. But they have a handful of correspondents outside the United States. You know, CNN has more than 25 correspondents outside the United States. It's a very different responsibility and footprint, and that remains the same.
But just to follow up, Ted Turner went to Cuba to open lines of communication with Castro. There were other incidences where I know Tom was in on the discussions of what was going on with the Gulf War and trying to, taking it beyond just the news coverage level and being actively engaged in build-in walls.
Well, I mean, look, I think the way that we and I see the role of CNN today to be actively involved in the world is to cover the world and expose the stories of the world. I think it's a very different time. Ted Turner was a very different person, right? He had a different personal mission and goal for the United States, for himself, and the role of the world. I don't see that for us in terms of us playing the role of diplomat on the global stage. He was a unique person in that time and place. I don't think that's our or my role.
This gentleman in the back.
Hi, could you talk a little bit about the relationship CNN has with the White House right now?
Sure.
And whether it's so polarizing that you can't effectively talk about the White House, report on the White House without somebody saying you're taking sides one way or another, and just additionally inform your own relationship, producing Donald Trump quite a few years ago with The Apprentice. Is this something that you could see coming?
Okay. Next question. With regard to our relationship with the White House today, look, it's actually pretty good. You wouldn't know that from many of the things they say or do, but the fact is, a lot of what they say or do is for consumption of their base, and is meant to keep that support up. On a day-to-day basis, we have a perfectly professional relationship with the White House. They call on our correspondents at the daily White House press briefing. They answer our questions, or answer our questions as much as they answer anybody's questions. They respond to us. It's actually a pretty professional relationship, and is not, as implied in the question, antagonistic or anything like that. For sure there are always moments, but it's a pretty professional relationship. I will say, you're right in that CNN is the only major American news organization, television or print, that has not had an interview with Donald Trump. It is 10 months in office now. He's done an interview with every other major television network and print organization. Listen, we'd love to do an interview with him, but one, it hasn't hurt us not to, and frankly, not having to play the game of access journalism so that we need that access has actually been very liberating and freeing, and so yes, we'd love to do an interview. Two, we don't have to do an interview.
Can I just ask, are you surprised by that?
No, I actually, from their political strategic standpoint, understand it, because I'm not sure how he's going to explain that he's sitting down with the organization that he has so attacked on a regular basis, and then why it's okay to do an interview. So I understand it from a political standpoint. I think it's ill-informed, and again, especially when you're talking about major international stories, again, CNN is the one network that's seen in every capital of the world, and it makes no sense to avoid CNN. But I understand what their political calculus is. With regard to, listen, I think that we've done so much brand research this year because I have been worried about whether or not all the attacks out of the White House have had any negative effect on CNN. I can tell you that CNN, it's had virtually no impact whatsoever, and in fact, CNN remains the most trusted source of news in the United States. So it hasn't hurt us with regard to that at all. And with regard to my relationship with Donald Trump dating back to the days of The Apprentice. I didn't produce the show. Mark Burnett was the executive producer of the show. I did greenlight it without question and put it on the air, and was responsible for The Apprentice being on the air. Could I have envisioned this? No. I did know during all of that time that he was a great marketer. So, one of the reasons that we actually wanted to do the show was we knew that even without a marketing budget, he would promote the show like no one else. So we knew that he was a great marketer. And we also knew that he would, every week that the ratings came in, he completely exaggerated the success of the show. And so nothing has changed.
Okay, I want to make sure I'm not ignoring this side of the room. If there are any, okay, ma'am.
Hi. Since we're talking about politics, I want to ask you a question just as a leader of an organization, a big organization, and one that's well respected. How do you obliterate bureaucracy in your company to ensure that there is across the board fairness and equanimity, whether it's in the dissemination of information to the public or even employment?
Okay. I think that the key there is to make sure that the organization knows what our goals are, what our responsibility is, and the standards that we have set. And I think the key as a leader is to articulate those things clearly, succinctly, and often. And so that's more of the internal, to make sure that people feel that there is equal treatment and that everybody is getting an opportunity. I think it is important for me and the leadership team to, again, lay out responsibilities, lay out goals, lay out results. And so I think that's what leadership calls for. With regard to the external piece that you asked about, I think the key there is to articulate what our strategy is and to strive for excellence and fairness, and to not be afraid to tell the team when we've done something wrong or made a mistake. We can't hold others accountable if we don't hold ourselves accountable. And so, again, you can't be afraid of acknowledging your own mistakes. Those are some of the things I think about.
Right.
This is Zucker. The other day I had these young people over here and watching I'm sorry, we were watching the stories on CNN about North Korea. And I think that some of our young people, just in their day-to-day lives, can you give a sense from your perspective, and I think you guys had some eyewitness coverage, how serious is this situation in North Korea?
So, so the question was could I talk a little bit about how serious is the situation with North Korea, and how worried should we all be? So it's worth noting that I think that CNN's reporter has been, who's based in Tokyo, has been into North Korea more times than any other Western reporter in the last several years. Will Ripley, who's based for us in Tokyo, has been there, I think, 14 times, and frankly is back in there as of tomorrow, today or tomorrow, and back in reporting again. And so it's a huge, again, global advantage for us to be able to get in there and tell that story. It is clear that what is going on with North Korea is as serious as it has been at any time. The just past director of the CIA said last week that he thinks the chance of nuclear war with North Korea is between 1 in 4 and 1 in 5, 20 to 25% chance. But he said, but that is still way too high, right? So I think the answer is it's unlikely, but still any possibility makes it beyond serious. And so it's an incredibly serious threat that the United States and the whole world faces.
We have time for one last question. So,
On a very personal level, just quickly, how much time do you personally spend here in the Atlanta market compared to the New York headquarters? And if you were to predict a lead breaking news story in, let's say, a year from now about this presidency and this political climate, what would you say?
Yeah. So here's the thing, I can't even tell you what's going to happen at 4
And you're
o'clock
not
today.
friends. Be open and be honest.
okay.
We're not friends.
Okay, so we're not friends, so I'll tell you. Here's the amazing thing about this administration is honestly, it changes hour to hour, right? I can guarantee you there will be a new story tonight that we don't know about yet. And so the idea of predicting what's going to happen in a year is impossible. I would tell you. I would make something up. I can't make up what's going to happen tomorrow. Okay? Listen. On one hand, that's the seriousness of what we're facing, and on the other hand, that's what's made it an unbelievably important and interesting time to do what many of us in this room do.
Have you ever seen a time like this in your media life? I would think not, but I'm just saying, in the scope of your experience. No.
This is nuts. And with regard to how much time do I spend in Atlanta, I would say, there's no set, it's not a set thing. I am based in New York, and, I spend time in New York, Washington, Atlanta.
There may be people in the Atlanta CNN office who might not like to see you here.
Right, exactly. These 4 tables are happy that I'm in New York, and they never hear from me at all. What are you laughing at? So I'm here, I would say, 1 or 2 days a month, maybe, something like that. I think we have one more.
okay, yes.
Well, we have some students here who are interested in pursuing a career in communications. And personally, I love the interview portions of some of my Don specifically and this program. So I was wondering if you could speak about how much autonomy and innovation goes into those interviews.
Have you met those guys? No, I was teaching. Listen, they have wide latitude and autonomy to do their interviews. They have producers, they have executive producers, they have me who suggests topics and questions, but they're the ones in the seat, they're the ones doing the interview. Now, everybody, most of those folks take input and get advice, but at the end of the day, it's on them because they're the ones in the seat and they're the ones doing the interview. And you cited 2 folks who I think are doing a fantastic job, Don and Chris, and we're incredibly proud of what they're doing. And they have wide latitude and autonomy to do what they're doing. Okay?
Jeff, thank you so much for being here. I believe we have a little something for you.
But before we present that, let's just thank both of them for what I think. Jeff.